Request everyone who's at the back to please settle down and take your places. We are beginning with our plenary session 3 on sustainability reporting, putting principles into practice. We have with us today Mr. Raj Malik, Controller and Chief of Business Performance and Financial Analysis, Reliance Industries Limited. Sir, can we have you on stage, please? Mr. John Bolton, Director Policy, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. Mr. Neerav Patel, Partner, ESG Consulting, Unicus. Mr. Hemant Sabharwal, Chartered Accountant, Partner with Price Waterhouse Chartered Accountants LLP. We have with us the moderator for our session, Mr. Shailesh Tyagi, Partner, Climate Change and Sustainability Leader, Deloitte. Handing over to Mr. Tyagi to moderate the session, please.
I think that's what I love about coming to these events, right? You all had your lunch. I'll make sure you don't look at your phone or sleep. I promise you this. Not many times I come to these panels and I have people I look up to like Venkat there, who when I moved to India, I live in Sydney, moved there 30 years ago, family still lives there. That is getting old, I wanted to come back to India. There are people like Venkat who gave me a chance to come back. I run Deloitte sustainability practice, 250 odd people, 6 partners. My colleague Amishi is here who leads sustainable finance, so a lot of familiar faces. And if you see this panel, even before I landed in India, and I told you I'll keep you awake, right? You have to make it interesting. Raj, I connected with Raj even before I landed. And you pick up his report, if you like it, talk to me and Raj. But anyway, that's different, that's past. Neerav is a good friend, a lot of people I know, doing fab work at Unicus. Hemant, old friend, we work together on opposite sides, but together. John, thanks for coming, bringing the global insights. Absolutely we need. I'm moderating the panel, but happy to take any question from Australia, New Zealand, APAC, that's my experience. I was involved in BRSR assurance standard, Raj and I, then Himal took over, so we wrote that. But look, the session today is about reporting. So how many of you understand sustainability? Sorry, I always start this question, and not because I can either drive an Uber or work in sustainability. I have done nothing else in my career since '98. Not because of that, but how many of you understand sustainability? Except Venkat, you're not. You know, I know. Anyone else can? Amishi, yeah, please. Please, Mike, if you can. Explain, what is sustainability?
Sustainability is good for us. If you're getting the world as is today, ensure it is there at least where it is.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So don't degrade it, that's it.
No, thank you.
Very simplistic.
So that's what I studied at uni in 2000, the first course at UNSW, right? Meeting the needs of the present without compromising, right? Brundtland Commission. But let me explain it to the lens I explained to my son, who at year 9 runs this at International Grammar School in Sydney. Very simple. You know how he explained to me? Let's go back and look at it from his lens. This event organized here is all about sustainability, right? You needed money and you understand that. You're accountants, you know it all. Financial capital. But the reason we are here is because of relationship. I didn't know John. And that's the power of relationship. That's social capital. The relationship, your value chain. The impact, right? But we needed people, human beings, not bots. That's human capital. And then, I see these plastic bottles. Next time I would like to see glass bottles, sorry. We can manage that impact, right? How? That's natural capital. You can complicate it. I can go in, make it more technical. But that's exactly, to run this event, it's about sustainability. It's no rocket science, right? And that's the reason I got into this field. I'm an engineer, did my MS in water management, MBA in finance and sustainability. But why? Or Amishi from gold medalist from Colombia, why she is working in this space, same as my colleagues. This is absolutely needed. Now, reporting. Let's come back to the event, right? Today's event is all about reporting. Now, reporting is an outcome. So why worry? Compliance, let's write a fabulous report. It looks good, easy to read. Brevity is the soul of wit, which I told you, Raj, some 4 years ago. Keep it short, keep it concise, keep it effective. But please understand, there's a strong disconnect between reporting and actual integration of ESG into business strategy at the moment. And I literally made these notes this morning for this event based on the work we are doing. And it basically will encompass all our views. And then we'll ask questions to the panel and they'll bring in their perspective. If you see, it's a healthy mix of consultants, industry, and global expertise. And even in consulting, they are catering to different sides of sustainability. But you know, when you look at India, let's talk about our country. When it comes to compliance, on one hand, we have traveled the journey of BRSR. How many of you understand BRSR? SEBI has a requirement of BRSR, mandatory reporting. Take it this way. You have to report on sustainability. There are certain requirements, you report. Some are voluntary, some are leadership indicators. You can choose to report. You need assurance on it. Of course, you understand assurance. You understand limited and reasonable assurance. That I don't need to explain. But the challenge we have, that companies are prioritizing compliance and not really, not all, but some of them are not looking at sustainability holistically. They don't look at from the lens of saying, what the long-term impact. So this is important to me, this is important to the value chain, where is the maximum impact? They're not really all of them looking at LCAs, resource efficiency, climate risks. They are reporting a lot on processes and systems and data. But what you need to do is look at the whole ecosystem. How you are collaborating with your value chain, how you are identifying hotspots, how you are identifying opportunities. But some of them are, you know, and one candidate I know is doing very well is on the panel. So I'm going to definitely ask these questions to him, how he managed to do that. Now, from your world of materiality and internal controls, one question for you. Do you think internal controls are at the same level in ESG or sustainability as they are in financial reporting? How many of you would agree? Not really. Exactly. So that's where value chain engagements. When I go and talk to people about value chain engagements, they tell me, oh, Salesh, one more requirement. They are scared by the enormity of it, right? They don't look at circularity, don't look at hotspots, as I said, take a joint proposition, joining hands, training programs, no. So that's where the opportunity is. It's changing. Companies are coming and we are running large-scale L&D programs for value chains. Same with business function. When I contact business function, they say a lot of work, Shailesh, right? And finally, technology. Every company I'm going to want to make it efficient using technology. It's not about reporting, it's about insights at the plant level and linking it to sustainability. So these are some of the insights we are seeing, and in that, we'll have enough time for question and answers. I'm a good moderator. I try to finish on time, and I promise you I will. But feel free at the end, keep noting down your questions and ask the questions at the end of it, please. Yeah. So Raj, I should give command to 4,000 students. My voice is large enough, but I will. So there's a reason I have chosen you for the first question, Raj. And the reason being, how we can align the whole world of sustainability and climate change to India. India's vision of, anyone wants tea? Sorry. $10 trillion economy, right? Right. Then think about 2070 decarbonization target, right? Net zero target. I call it decarbonization. Net zero can lead to anything. It's the future. But what in your view, companies are doing to align their initiatives in climate change and overall sustainability to that vision? That's my question to you, the first question. Over to you, please.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The question that Shailesh has put forward to me, I mean, if you speak to corporates, you will find the people are very perplexed and complex. At one point of time, you say that, you know, you have to grow, you have to contribute to 10 trillion economy of the country. At the same time, we are telling that you have to use less energy, less pollutions, less emissions. So how do you balance it out? The only answer that we have today is green energy. And I think India, I genuinely feel India is on the path of taking leadership of green energy. Our Honorable Prime Minister has set the tone, and corporates, numerous of the corporates have taken up the job very seriously. You see the amount of growth that we have in solar. You see the amount of growth that we have in electric vehicles. Presently, after being the chief controller of the largest company in India by market cap, I have been put as a chief business officer of CBG business. It is not a demotion. Don't think I have been demoted. But my leadership told me that business needs you. It's been enough is enough in controllership. Now you please do something for the business. So that is the seriousness the corporates are put. In fact, green energy, new energy, if you go through annual report of several corporates, I will not name it, you will find where we are. My organization, Reliance Industries Limited, we have announced, our chairman announced that we spend $10 billion towards green energy. We are in solar, manufacture of panels as well as solar energy. We are there in the market now. People are known about it. We are in our 5 gigafactories already is on construction, is on in Jamnagar. Hydrogen, we want to provide the leadership that India wants. Battery, the things will change. I mean, after a few years, it might so happen when you walk to a petrol pump, instead of putting petrol, you will just swap your battery in the next petrol pump again. After 200 kilometers, 100 kilometers, again you swap your battery. So in there, fuel, putting the fuel and other things that will go, and it will only run on energy, green energy battery. CBG, compressed biogas. I mean, this is a very small business. We have only 7 plants in India, yet we are the largest producer at this point of time in the whole world. So we have to understand the strength of this business. Agricultural waste, which is a problem, a source of emission, that is being contributed or converted into energy. Municipal waste, which is untouchables, which people don't know what to do, that is being converted to energy. And barren land, which is not used for agriculture purpose, we can grow a sort of grass, Napier grass, and those all three become the input of manufacturing of biogas, which is equivalent to LNG. For your information, the quality of biogas. LNG has 90% of methane content. This biogas has 95% of methane content. Our gas at least has 95% of methane content. So it's a high quality than LNG. Lot of the petrol pumps around our plant actually are fuels the vehicles with biogas and not LNG, which people may not know. So, and the offshoot is that we manufacture as an offshoot, as a byproduct, huge quantity of organic manure which is carbon rich. Today we know our farmers are using urea, DAP and other things which is chemical based, and that is actually eroding our soil. 24 billion acres of land are being wasted in the whole world every year because of the soil erosion, and this carbon will actually enhance it. So I think new energy is the green energy, and it will actually show the path towards the 10 trillion economy. Otherwise, I don't see any other formula that can pave India towards 10 trillion economy.
No, thanks, Raj. And I think so just to sum up, though India came up with this regulation called BRSR, but sustainability for corporates in India is real. We are sorting out real world issues. It's not about writing a report. But let's go back to the world I come from and where you are. If you look at the United States or the UK and US, and you realize that a lot of things are regulated. It started with heavy regulation and more of its alignment to business culture, the way businesses are done. They call it regulation, I call it's alignment. But of late, if I look at those markets from here, I see a lot of deregulation happening, right? The whole regulation is being pulled off. And we were discussing that. A lot of investment went by companies, and now they are thinking, hang on, whether it's worth going ahead with it. So my question to you would be, bringing that learning to India, how it will impact companies, considering we have value chains everywhere? And second, what are some of the challenges and opportunities which you envisage we need to take care of people like Raj, as an example?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Shailesh, and I wonder, are we entering into an era of deregulation. I mean, is this a reality that we're facing, and how do we deal with that from a business perspective? What parts of deregulation are positive in terms of removing compliance burdens for business, and what parts of regulation are actually helpful and moving forward for business in various different ways? So historically, it's no secret, I'm sure many of you are aware that in the EU, it's very much been a regulation-driven economy. That's how the EU has operated, and it's built a very complex and sophisticated framework of regulation that's it's created markets in many areas, and it's changed society, changed the nature of business. And in a way, you kind of have to start with that, because if you start with no regulation, then you build regulation up. And I think the question you get to at the end is, well, at what point is there a change in paradigm? And I think we really are coming into this year, we're seeing a shift in mindset and approach, very much catalysed by what's happening in the US. But the EU, even if you put aside the US, the EU's facing Europe in general, is facing two real challenges. One is competitiveness. So the Mario Draghi report, which was published late last year, looked in great detail at competitiveness in the European economy, and it found some really quite worrying truths about the reality of competitiveness. And so you either have two responses to that. You either deregulate, if you see that as a barrier to business, or you double down on regulation. If you combine that then with pressure from the US, which is questioning EU regulation as a trade barrier and threatening tariffs in response, then you've got a very different environment. So in that world, can the EU continue to show leadership in the way it might have done in the past? So if you look at things like the GDPR, data protection regulation, that was very influential around the world in how regulation was then formed. It was very useful because in the digital age something needed to be done to protect personal data, but it very much enabled a European influence around the world on that basis. Now, what we've seen so far this year is an effort it's called burden reduction, so to reduce the regulatory burden of the European reporting framework. That has two sides to it. So one side is reducing the scope of who's covered. And I know from the discussions that we had in this forum last year, there was real, questioning of the extent to which the disclosure regime reaches down into the value chain and the extent to which businesses within the value chain need to report. So that was very much the focus of these reforms. The other was looking at the scope of disclosures. So there are about 1,200 data points in the European standards, if you compare that to 140 or so in the BRSR in India. A lot more data points, and that's now going to come into question. So the next stage of this will be, so it's been announced that this will be now reviewed, and there will be a process of consultation with business to look at the disclosure points and to assess what really works for business and where might there be opportunities to simplify. So I think this is a different world, but where that leaves the BRSR, I think it's important to remember that the roots of the BRSR are quite different in that it's rooted in national priorities and national strategy. So first of all, this is a framework that's looking at business responsibility first. Business responsibility is essential for trust. It's essential for a wider agenda around investment and attracting investment. So that seems to me to be a pretty stable building block. You've then got a wider relationship expectation on the corporate world to provide a social responsibility. So India is pioneering in its CSR law that requires corporate contribution to CSR purposes. That doesn't have a parallel in Europe. And again, with that commitment of business to society, it's natural you then have some reporting that sits around that. So I think there's a lot there before you get to the carbon reporting elements. And the carbon reporting itself is important. Not only does it power business models, as Raj has described, not only is it the root of business, but there's also the reality that when you're attracting investment, and we may see this in Europe with a very big stimulus package that's been announced to focus on defence as one of the means, and focus on infrastructure. When you're trying to stimulate growth, that can be very carbon intensive. It can actually push you in the other direction. It can double down on old technologies, and it can increase the carbon intensity in the economy. So in that context, reporting is really valuable because it allows you to take a more broader perspective and work out what's the carbon impact of the investments that I'm making. So even if there's a deregulatory environment, I think there's a lot of value in the reporting that we've built up which will persist.
No, thank you. And, reporting forces you to think. Absolutely. I mean, it forces you to think. And if you don't know what you're doing, how are you going to improve? How are you going to manage? But few observations, right? And based on my own experience, look, BRSR is an interoperable standard. If you look at BRSR, it's based on various standards globally. We have Global Reporting Initiative, which used to be framework when I was part of some of the launches. It's GRI standard now. Now we are doing some work in Sri Lanka on IFRS S1 and S2. Your word, right? And how you're looking at aligning. In between, you have TCFT. So, SASB. Any due diligence I do, the first thing they would say, look at my industry out of 77 and look at materiality. So, it's interoperable. There's a lot to learn from the global. Like Australia, as an example, have a job and competitiveness program, safeguarding mechanism. And this we can talk offline. So, when you evolve from reporting, then safeguards come in, carbon tax comes in and all. But I'll come to you, Nirav, because with all the guidance, global learnings, great work done by great corporates, one challenge always is how much time I need to put in these initiatives. And if I am running a small and medium enterprise, family-owned business, small-scale business, how much time, effort, money I really have. So what kind of challenges I have, how can I overcome those challenges? Because I know you're working with quite a few of them. And then what kind of guidance I have, in public domain. So that I would like to just understand from you based on your work with some of these companies, small scale companies. Over to you, please.
Sure, Shailesh. Thank you very much. I think it's a very, very, very important matter. Look, in any economy, small, medium enterprises are the bedrock. In some ways, they make up vast number of industries. Both you and John did talk about value chain. So the strategic imperative for these small and medium entities typically stems from the fact that they would be within the value chain, supply chain of large entities. You see Reliance Industries, they may have several entities which kind of fall within its ecosystem. If Reliance Industries, as part of BRSR, or for that matter any company, as part of its BRSR reporting on value chain, has to get information from small and medium enterprises. As I said, it is important for them. Their customers asking for them, their principal customer asks for information from them. So it's important that they have to be on the whole sustainability journey in that sense. One of the biggest mistakes you would make is to kind of prioritize or look at it only from a reporting perspective. That's like putting the cart before the horse. I think if they start looking at materiality, what really matters to them? What are the things that are really important from their perspective vis-a-vis their stakeholders who could be limited? Then it's a good way of making sure that you embed that within the ethos, within the DNA of the organization, and then start building up, start taking targets, and then ultimately make sure that you kind of culminate that into a report. Another element to the whole strategic imperative around for small and medium entities is attracting capital. It could be capital from a different set of investors which open up to you if you're following some of these norms in the right earnest, be it private equity, pension funds, so on and so forth. So that is another element that small and medium entities should kind of focus on to make sure that they have access to that. They would want to raise it now, later on, etc. So that's the other big element to it. Now, in terms of the cost and in terms of what it takes to report, I think the world is realizing that there's no one size fit all for it. John did speak about the ESRS standards in Europe. They're coming up with a specific standards for SMEs. In India, we have, to the extent of value chain information, only some of the core indicators are required to be procured. So if you focus on some of the core elements, I think that would be a good way of approaching this, and that would be, in my view, a way to proceed.
No, thanks, Nirav. And you mentioned the word access to capital, right? And Heman, coming to you, for some reason, Heman and I either meet at these conferences on the panels or working for financial institutions, right? And in your role working for those banking and financial services, one thing where we always discuss how you integrate ESG or ESG risks, to be precise, into your credit decision, investment decisions, right? So my question to you is more around, if you are proactive in understanding those risks, you have sound practices to come up with those risks, and then you go and integrate into your business decisions, how beneficial it would be, and what are some of the challenges? Over to you, please.
Thanks, Shailesh. So first of all, I'd like to thank CII for inviting me here to share my views. So I think, Shailesh, you spoke about financial institutions looking at ESG risks and building them into their investment decisions. So before I answer the question, I think I wanted to mention about a concept of UNPRI, United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. Wherein if an investor signs up to UNPRI principles, they make a commitment that any investment that they will make, they will look at ESG performance of that company. So, there are almost 5,000 plus investors across the globe who have signed up to UNPRI, and assets under management are north of $120 trillion. So, the point I'm trying to make is that investors are looking at these aspects alongside the financial performance all the time. So that's what is sort of pushing this agenda from an investor perspective. Now, coming to how the Indian businesses can sort of address these risks, I think first and foremost, and I think it was mentioned earlier also, is to integrate ESG into your whole business operations, decision-making process. I think I still see that in a lot of companies it's being approached as a separate, in a silo, as a separate department, as if the sustainability team is supposed to address sort of all issues across the organization. So I think it is about looking at these aspects across the business, whether it is supply chain, whether it is product development, whether it is corporate governance. So just to take an example, if a company is, let's say, acquiring another business, looking at value chain partners, looking at alliances, looking at joint ventures, all these aspects at some level should look at the sustainability aspects. Second thing, since you mentioned about risk, how do the companies manage their risks, is how do you enhance your risk management function overall? So if we see again in companies, mostly the risk management function evolves around the financial risks. So I think there again, some effort needs to be put in to sort of have a proper framework, robust framework to assess and manage the sustainability risks. And that would include climate change impact, social factors, regulatory shifts, etc. Also, I think for large manufacturing companies having a wide footprint, it's important to incorporate scenario analysis and stress testing into their whole risk process to identify potential financial risks or exposures. Thirdly, I think making some investment into sustainable practices is sort of important. Allocating enough resources for such initiatives, whether it is renewable energy, we spoke about green energy, resource efficiency, sustainable infrastructure, etc. So it's important to allocate resources for that. Again, we spoke a lot about reporting. I think being transparent in your reporting is also very important. That sort of helps in building trust with all the stakeholders, whether it is your investors, shareholders, or the broader stakeholders. And we've also, we hear a lot about greenwashing in the context of ESG. So, I mean, greenwashing is not just about what you present in your reports, but also about what you do not present in your reports. So if you are hiding the negative elements or impact of your operations and not presenting that, then that also sort of in a way amounts to greenwashing. And I think lastly, ESG or sustainability is an evolving agenda. It's growing very fast. I think corporates need to focus on capacity building throughout the organization, whether it is the board, it is the management or employees. I think appropriate capacity building needs to happen. And building this sort of internal capacity can improve the ability of the organizations to identify the risks and sort of address or make an action plan against them.
Oh, thank you. And there's a reason I asked you that question. Just to add, you know, having for the past 2 years heavily involved in the BFSI space in India, in and around India, even Sri Lanka, whether it's finance emission, you know, whether it's challenges in assurance, we'll come to that. One thing I have realized is capacity building, learning and development. Over the past 1 year, I just realized more and more companies are coming to us and saying, can you on a weekly basis run a training program? One of these PSUs, we ran training program throughout the year, every Thursday. Even for other global company, we are doing it even on Saturdays. I'm like, okay, because that's the only time people get, right? And because they have this value chain. So interesting. I mean, lot happening, and you're so right. It's important taking the whole value chain, taking the whole workforce, you know, having the right governance. But with that, Raj, I'll come to you, and we covered new energy, India's ambition towards net zero, and being a powerhouse, global powerhouse. But when we talk about climate change and carbon strategy, I'm seeing that, look, this is about reporting, and reporting, the other element is mechanisms in place, right? Whether it's voluntary or regulations. Unlike CDM days, which was demand and supply, now it's evolving. We all know India is at the cusp of coming up with their own voluntary mechanism and compliance mechanism. Great. And companies are doing internal carbon pricing. They have their own carbon strategy. But with your role, I'm trying to link the question to your role and also what audience would like to hear. When you do your financial analysis, how much that plays a role in the carbon strategy? What's the linkage of your financial analysis to your carbon strategy? And that's what I would like to ask you, please.
Actually, I agree with Hemen when Hemen said that, you know, that there is a sustainability department and they are responsible for doing everything. But what people do not understand, they are just a mirror. Whatever the organization does, they will be able to show that on the mirror, reflection of that. But actually the organization does. Similarly, carbon credit is something, there are two kinds of people in India. 90% of people are scared of carbon credit. I mean, I have to buy, there's a financial outflow of resources, And few others like my business presently, we are really very optimistic. When it will come, we are waiting because we know we'll generate carbon credit. So, I mean, corporates will only become serious when there is an inflow or outflow, a chance of inflow or outflow of financial resources, and carbon credit is definitely that. At one point of time, I think people used to think, it's all on paper. It's good to be on paper, nothing else. We have been preparing paper for so many years now. So many corporates are doing it. But now I think people are really taking it serious. Lot of people are being actually started the exercise of registering themselves of their products. We personally have registered few products. We are working on that. So now things are different. Financial analysis is very, very important for sustainability. Like again, I'm thankful to him when he brought up property. I'll give you a story. One particular corporate, not our corporate, they set up a plant, and the plant set production. So there was a lot of celebration, lot of people, lot of good accolades, the technical team, production team, everything. At the end of the year, when the BRSR came, they found that emission has increased by 20%. And the entire flag was on the sustainability team. How can an emission increase by 20%? But they have nothing to do. You have started put up a plant, you have started production, and obviously it's a factor. Emission is a factor of production, it will increase. So the people who did the analysis, who did entire project report, they forget entire about sustainability. They call financials, IRR, Excels, everything was there. They forget about sustainability. They forget about their commitment towards sustainability or emission, etc. Similarly, I think as per carbon rating is concerned, people have geared up. People are now excited to have regulations. I mean, sometimes I feel we are really slow. We really want something to come up and really want something in paper so that I can do something. Enough of analysis in paper, I think we are there. So let's hope something comes up.
Something I'll tell you about Raj, it's linked to this. Raj is never happy. The call I got from Raj after reporting for 15 years, and I was in Sydney, used my wife's office, I remember. He said, read my report and tell me how I can improve. And I'm like, the guy who has been reporting forever. And and sustainability is a journey. That's what I was trying to say. You cannot stop. You need to look back, understand, bring people on board, link your financial analysis to it, because one of the challenge, so what is ESG 2.0? Let me ask, and then I'll come to John, because that's my next question is about real challenges. What is ESG 2.0? What next? Anyone? Feel free, because I told you to keep you awake, right? So I tell you what it is. People like Venkat, and I don't want to, when they talk to me about, show me the linkage of ESG to the bottom line. Show me value addition. That's the level of discussion I talk to my leaders, whom I look up to, right? Great report, great systems, great processes, but how it's really helping me improve my valuation, right? That's ESG 2.0. When we go and talk to companies, I was with a steel company, and the guy just told me, great, but tell me at the plant level how you'll improve. So that's where it's going, right? And with that in mind, that's one challenge. The other challenge is scope 3. How many of you know scope 1, 2, 3, and 4 in greenhouse gas emissions? So look, before we talk about scope 3, it's important you know, scope 1, think about I own a thermal fired power plant. The sustainability folks will kill me, but coming from Australia, I can give that example. Scope 1, if I burn coal in my boilers, I'm responsible for that coal, that's scope 1. Greenhouse gas emissions from scope 1 activity, which I own. Scope 2, energy from the grid. Scope 3, if I took a cab to come here, and that cab is not owned by me, but I did it for this particular event, it's scope 3. Scope 4, which we discuss, come up with a product which reduces emission throughout the life cycle. I use it, you reduce emission, that's scope 4. Now, coming to you, John, scope 3. And one of the things here is about data. Looking at the flyer, and I came up with this question from the flyer. Flyer is about data infrastructure. I'm like, Nirav, that also for you, how we can leverage global landscape, what can learn around data management, the data points and all. But John, coming back to you, scope 3 is a challenge. If I go and do net zero, which I have done for 4 PSUs in India, the whole net zero pathway implementation for 2, one of the challenge I realized, whether it's Woodside Petroleum in Australia and Australian companies, I remember when working with them, if my 90% emissions are outside my boundary, how I'm looking at my net zero. And getting that data is a challenge. Scope 3 is one of the biggest challenge in terms of data quality. What are your views? Because some companies from where you come have already achieved that and they have encountered this challenge. What are the learnings for us, please?
So you're right. It is a real challenge, and I'd like to just take a step back and take on your challenge of ESG 2.0, because I think Scope 3 is quite a nice example of this. I think when we step back in 10 years' time, we will have, I hope, much more sustainable businesses that have a much more holistic view on what they do, but more importantly have management control and information that enables them to do more than just optimize profits. And when you think about, well, what does that actually mean? As business professionals, historically, we would have done our education and then gone out into the world of work and we learn on the job how to do our work. It would be rare to go back to college and learn again. But with AI coming in, I don't think we can take those old certainties for granted. I think we're going into a world where we are going to be challenged to relearn and rethink. And what better means could there be of doing that within business than what we've gone through in the last several years in terms of sustainability? We've learnt something new and we've rooted that in business process, business understanding and management. And those skills are transferable into other areas as well. It's just my view, but I think this is a good example of where the AI-enabled economy may go in 10 years' time and how it brings us along as humans, because we've proven we can do this with ESG. So that brings us to Scope 3, which is one of the biggest challenges. And when you think about deregulation, is this an area where perhaps the regulation will make it a bit easier in the future? Now, we don't know at this stage where that may go. There is going to be discussion in Europe about the European standards, but we've already got a framework within which we're doing this Scope 3 reporting, and companies are doing it, albeit in some countries that don't yet have a standardized approach. They're doing it in different ways with different formats. Now, Scope 3 has a clear objective. This is about going beyond the boundaries of a company and looking more broadly across the economy at where the emissions are being made to enable us to have more control over emissions. So the objective of this is clear, and it is an ambitious objective. Now, this morning it was interesting, I was reading the Financial Times, there was an article that was saying that 36 companies around the world account for half of global emissions. So that's a really interesting statistic. So, could you just focus on Scope 1 and Scope 2? Is the real kind of challenge of the reducing emissions, reducing carbon intensity, does it just lay with a few big corporates? The answer to that must be no, because actually it's people further down the value chain who are using the energy and who have the control over the emissions. So there's a clear purpose for Scope 3 reporting, but it does introduce data quality issues in terms of the data quality is potentially problematic, and it asks in particular a lot of businesses to be involved in the data gathering process, and this is where the wide scope of the European reporting standards became significant, because by extending disclosure and in particular assurance, because there's no point having disclosure without assurance to make sure that the numbers are accurate, it extended that framework of a much broader range of companies. So it meant that the data would have been available much more widely from third parties. And it seems now we're stepping back in terms of a value chain and in terms of the companies that are reporting. So I think data quality issues are really going to come to the fore in the next round of reporting. And it will be instrumental to see what kinds of requests are coming down from partners, who are having to do this reporting. And it makes us think about, what does that do in terms of greenwashing risk? How do we deal with that as professionals? And I think Scope 3 is where we're challenged. And there's a debate to be had, I think, about how we deal with some of these issues. Now we've done the first wave of reporting, we understand what it looks like. How do we start thinking about tackling some of those issues, particularly in an environment where the stimulus that was coming, that was bringing a lot of businesses into the net of reporting. If that potentially steps back and businesses in the value chain are not going to be producing information to the quality that we might have expected a few years ago, how do we deal with that, and how do we manage those challenges? So that's one set of things. And my positive message at the beginning was, well, do we treat this as a learning exercise that equips us as business professionals, and it equips our organisations with capabilities that they didn't have before, and we can use that for a number of things beyond sustainable value creation. But what does it mean for solutions? One of the areas, so we've been, at ICAW, I've been on the working group for the e-liability standard, which is a project headed by two very well-known academics, Professor Karthik Ramana at Oxford University and Robert Kaplan at Harvard. The prototype standard was published in December, and it's been engaged with by a number of leading Indian corporates who have been part of the creation and collaboration process around this standard. So it may be in India in particular that there's a real interest and market for this e-liability standard. Now, still very much the standard is at a prototype stage. It's still very much an early days exercise. But e-liability is focusing much more on the producer, the emissions embodied within the product. And crucially, e-liability is rooted in data quality. So what it's asking for is the creation of an e-ledger to sit alongside financial ledgers, and the e-ledger is then used to record the emissions from a particular product, and that entry can then be transferred to others in the value chain. Now, if you think about e-invoicing, which has been adopted in India, is now being adopted in the EU, and the UK is consulting on e-invoicing at the moment, the means of kind of digitalising business transactions, could that be integrated with some kind of an e-ledger? Could you have a carbon value of a product alongside a financial value? There is this discussion going on in Europe at the moment. As the e-invoicing system is being built, people are asking whether that might also involve some kind of recording of carbon. Now, very early stages, I don't think there's any indication that will happen, but it just raises questions about, do we need something else to ensure data quality, and will we need another solution further down the line? And for those in business thinking about investment and upskilling and training, maybe that's something to take away and think about.
No, thanks, John, and some great points raised, because, you forced me to think, and whatever we are discussing, a lot has been happening in this space. I give just two examples, right, about embodied. One, in BRSR, through LCA, companies are already looking at life cycle assessment. Product, like Raj, look at 18 products from memory, maybe more. Companies are looking at product-based life cycle assessment. But I give you an example just to substantiate what John was saying. 2008, I was in New Zealand, and my boss, Nick Main, he went to London, and he saw NZ Wine and Eland's Wine, two wine companies, their products on the shelf. And he was global head of sustainability for Deloitte, and the chairman of Deloitte New Zealand as well came back. I reported to him, and he's told me, what can we do for them? Carbon miles. And we did their life cycle assessment, and they were certified carbon and zero under a land care program. So this was the thinking in 2008, right? And numerous other examples with oil and gas companies and all exporting carbon out of Australia. But coming back to you and staying to the theme of greenhouse gas emissions, scope 3 people use for sustainability, not really, it's greenhouse gas emission, as you know, Nirav. But then when we look at greenhouse gas emissions, there's a lot to learn for us, right? Europe, Australia are the leaders in when it comes to greenhouse gas emission, even far ahead of Europe and US as well. They've mandatory reporting since 2010 under NGER. So what we can learn, right, across industries from these regions and bring those learnings for emission reporting in India?
No, that's really important. I think still fairly evolved frameworks also don't mandate scope 3. So that is something that is evolving. Companies are looking at reporting scope 3. In India, the challenge really is, as John said, the data, the information that is needed to kind of come up with reporting under all categories of scope 3 really becomes a big kind of bottleneck inhibition. The amount of uncertainty, the amount of judgment one has to use in coming up with that data is quite significant. In India, still we rely quite extensively on some of the emission factors, on some of the databases that are available internationally. In India, I think it could be under the Ministry of Environment, it could be under the aegis of any other ministry. They should take up the mantle to make sure that you homologate, you kind of make sure that you indigenize the information sets that are relevant for industries in India, across various categories, across various sectors, so that information gathering becomes that much easier. Also, on a completely different, angle on the value chain. Again, why would all corporates go to a same company trying to extract that kind of information from them? Why can't you have the world of financial services has solved for that problem through agencies like CIBIL? The insurance industry has solved for it. So it is important that an agency such as those can be built in India, which will collate the data through AI or through any other means, XBRL, have that on a platform which can then be used and leveraged by various companies so as to improve, enhance their scope 3, value chain reporting, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of work can be done by India, be the ministry or any other agency, in CII, for example, to enable that, in my view, Shailesh.
Look, essentially you're saying improve your scope 1 because your scope 1 is someone's scope 3. Right? But why stick to scope 3? Because Hemal, knowing him, he would say, why scope 3? Why not ESG? The man is an expert when it comes to assurance, right? I've seen it firsthand. So, Hemal, based on your experience, quality of data, of ESG I'm talking about, scope 3 of course is a bigger challenge. It's evolving, guidance is coming. But according to you, what is the major challenge for ESG in terms of data quality? And what are some of the learnings based on your experience companies should start improving governance, make a checker mechanism using maybe technology? But over to you, please.
So, yeah, Shailesh, I think that's an important question. I think John also mentioned, Nirav also mentioned. I think whatever sustainability initiatives a company takes, unless you have appropriate data to capture those initiatives, you won't be able to sort of assess the success of those initiatives. From my experience of having interacted with a number of companies across last many years, especially last 2 to 3 years, I think I've seen that companies still sort of face a hurdle or struggle a lot on how to track and report on their sustainability performance. Challenges are to sort of report on a consistent basis, not just on year on year, but across different businesses, across different locations, sites, plants, etc. So it has been a challenge. I think one of the key things that I have seen, which is contributing to this, is sort of lack of defined systems and processes. You mentioned about controls earlier. So my question is, why should controls for sustainability be very different from the financial controls we have? In terms of robustness of those controls and processes, why shouldn't there be proper SOPs when it comes to sort of reporting or data capturing for ESG? And so I think that's something very important. So I think having a proper process of being able to track data from its source to the corporate level where it is reported is very important, including having all audit trails so that at any point of time, if assurance of that data needs to be done, that can be done. So that's one of the most important things that I've seen. Second is that I think while earlier I spoke about the responsibility on the sustainability department or function, so I think here in terms of data and information, the importance of sustainability function is there because they need to drive it across the organization. While the data will come from different functions, but there has to be a team to drive that. Imagine for large companies, let's say we are talking about Reliance here, unless there are people who are driving this agenda and ensuring consistency, it will not happen. Third thing, again, we spoke about value chain partners. I think value chain partners, getting data from them is a big challenge. Value chain partners could be from large listed companies to small individual enterprises. Timing of data, quality of data is different, so that's another big challenge that companies are grappling with. I think the other big issue that I've seen is the completeness of data. See, when it comes to financial reporting, the standards, etc., have been in existence for decades now. We have a double entry bookkeeping system, so there is way to ensure that the data is complete. But when it comes to non-financial or sustainability related data, I think that's where the challenge comes in. So I think unless your sustainability data is in some manner mapped to the financial transactions, it will be difficult to ensure completeness of the data. I mean, again, to take an example, if a company has several plants in India, outside India, offices, sales depots, warehouses, how will you ensure that, for example, the energy data, the emissions data, the fuels they've used has been reported, what has been reported is complete. So unless you marry that with the financial data, it'll never be foolproof. Other few things are, I think, sector-specific challenges. If we, let's say, talk about BRSR, we know it's a regulation or a requirement which is sector agnostic, but then a lot of sectors, especially let's say the FS sector, is facing a big challenge, and the service industry as well, as to how to report on those on such a regulation, which doesn't differentiate because of what environmental footprint of a manufacturing company would be very different from a service industry. I think other thing is that use of technology. At least I've seen that there is still very little use of technology in this whole area. I mean, there are platforms, tools used by companies, but they are, I would say, quite basic. They generally help you just collate information across different locations or sites. But I think it's time that that one should look at integrating the non-financial data along with the financial data into the ERPs that the companies have. I have seen, again, companies taking some steps toward that, but I think as a country, as an industry, or maybe even if I talk about top 100 to 250 to 250 large listed companies, I think there's a long way to travel there. And lastly, I think we've also been talking about assurance. So I think I again feel that preparedness for assurance has been low. While reporting is one part of it, I mean, completing the BRSR like a form and submitting it is one part of it, but ensuring that you have proper trails going down to base records is another part of it. So I think what I've seen is that preparedness of companies was quite low, especially when the reasonable assurance, mandatory reasonable assurance requirement came in. Post year-end, companies were trying to decipher what BRSR requires and what the definitions mean. So I think that obviously does take you back and creates challenges for reporting.
Yeah. Now look, considering it was the last question, Look, when it comes to data, and we'll keep 5 minutes for question and answer, good tab on the time. It's not only about data quality, it's about data accuracy, repeatability, reliability. These are the terms, right? And which I think honestly, our friends can explain so well. But based on my own experience, I was just looking at getting recertification with the clean energy regulator. Realized I have done 5,000 hours of audits as well. And then I realized, okay, so why an engineer with an MBA in finance or sustainability doing it? I tell you why. Because you need to really understand the subject matter. The moment you move from manual data to automated data, data comes from various sources. Workflows, Salesforce service now you have heard, right? Now the NVZ, IBM, as an example, ERPs you mentioned, right? And then of course, HR systems and SAP and all. It's a challenge. And when we automate, whether it's a manual tag, automated tag, and we collate everything, it's a challenge from the field. So it's not only about that companies aren't doing enough, it's also a challenge. It's a real challenge. Different types of data, different sources. Now look, just a couple of questions. Yeah, we started at 20, so we have 2-3 minutes. I don't take time, neither I give it back, sorry. Please guys, any questions you have from this panel? I've never seen such a healthy mix of panel in recent times. Yeah, okay, please.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Indranil Chattopadhyay. I work in the biofuel space. Basically, it's sustainability driven. So I have got 2 questions for the panel. Number 1, yes, it's very easy for a government enterprise or a big enterprise like Reliance to do this reporting and also implement the systems. So how does what all are the entire business ecosystem doing for the MSME partners who supply to them? Who foots the bill? And the concept of carbon tax, who pays that? And finally, the premiumness over a sustainable sources product generated over a so-called non-sustainable product, who pays for that? That's my question.
Raj, you want to take
Are
this?
the investors willing to do this? That's my question. Investors willing to put the money in that?
Some of it will take offline. That will be easier. But I guess Raj, cover.
Well, I'll try to answer your questions. First and the foremost one, that about the value chain partners. So I think reporting of value chain partners or putting the responsibility on the big enterprise is a very smart move by the government. It's a very smart move, I personally feel. Sustainability is not about walking alone. Sustainability is all about walking together. So if the big enterprise has to be successful, they might have financial resources, they might have big systems, they might have great systems, IT, etc. And they can employ a lot of people. But at the same time, if India has to grow and India has to really develop and India has to move the path of sustainability, they have to take along others. So that's why this reporting has come. I can tell you that from our example, Reliance Industries. So when we look at the chain of, and we are doing a value chain reporting, we are taking it very seriously. So I have realized one of my department members, it's very easy, sir. Just float a questionnaire, and they made a questionnaire which will, there's a portal sort of thing, it's a mail, it will click and everything will happen and they will fill up. I said, okay, fine, go ahead. I knew nothing will happen, but a young girl was heading it and I did not want to discourage her. The questionnaire was made, floated, and after 2 months, she came back and said, no one is replying, sir. I don't have any response. I said, it had to be because people don't understand what you written in the question and what is the impact. So what we need to do was that we started talking, we have listed down, I said, okay, you please target your value chain partners this year. Who are the value chain partners that you target this year? One is a journey, like in 1 year you're going to reach, and then we started doing training programs with value chain partners. We started having agencies who deals with the value chain partners. So we have one agency who will speak to the value chain partner, help them to fill up the data. The other agency who will take up the data and then collate and give us. So we are doing it, but very seriously. So I will come back to your question. I think I personally believe the responsibility of top corporates is to also take along the value chain partners. And the value chain partners has to exist in the market, right? The corporates, we need to take their resources on value chain partners. At the same time, value chain partners also need to survive. So it is like both ways. Both will adjust and ultimately this will happen. But this is a very smart move of introducing reporting of value chain partners in the BRSR. I must say that.
Yeah. No, look, let's take the questions offline because that will be more, we can have more engaging discussion. Thanks so much, Raj. Again, good to see you. John, thanks for flying all the way. Nirav, good to see you. And as always, Eamon, guys, feel free to engage with the panel members. I call them up when I need to learn. I've been doing this for 25 years, but still I call them up, right? This is all I've done. So feel free to catch up. This is a perfect opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I sleep after 15 minutes. You stayed awake. Thank you for that. Cheers.